Can we sit with you? Sean and Simi asked a man sitting alone. They did not wait for a full answer. Simi was already pulling out the chair on his left. Sean was already settling into the one on his right, straightening his blazer with the efficiency of someone who had just conducted a strategic deployment and was satisfied with its execution. The man, broad-shouldered, impeccably suited, with the kind of face that made rooms adjust themselves around it, looked down at them. Then he went very still. Not the still of a man being patient with children. The still of a man who has just looked at two faces and felt something in the earth beneath him shift without warning. They looked exactly like him. He looked at the boy. The jaw, the brow, the exact angle at which the eyes sat in the face, all of it arriving at him like information he already knew. He looked at the girl. Same jaw. Same brow. Same eyes, watching him with the calm, thorough attention of someone conducting an inspection. He looked at both of them again. His hand moved to set down his drink, slowly, the way a person moves when they do not trust their own grip. He asked, "Where did you come from?" And they understood immediately. Simi's arm extended, finger pointing without drama, directly at the restroom corridor. Do Yoon Kwon nodded. He sat with these two children who wore his own face as though it had always belonged to them, and he waited. Across the room, Prudent Okafor came out of the restroom, and looked toward the table where she had left her children. Her children were not there. She did not scream. She was not that kind of woman. She scanned, left quadrant, right quadrant, center, and found nothing. She moved through the crowd without touching anyone, her face arranged into the expression she wore when she was managing a crisis without announcing it, which was the same expression she wore in boardrooms and courtrooms and every other room that had tried to reduce her. She moved. She looked. She moved again. 10 minutes in, a voice cut clean through the noise of the party. Mom. Sean. She turned. Her eyes swept the room, and landed on Sean. And the blood in her veins turned to something colder than blood. Sean and Simi were walking toward her, perfectly fine, perfectly composed, slightly smug in the way they always were when they had technically not broken any rules. Behind them, a man was rising from his chair. Do-yoon turned at Sean's voice. And time, which had been moving normally up until that point, stopped entirely to the woman he had been searching for across 8 years, across 2 continents, across every investigation and dead-end and sleepless calculation was standing 20 feet away with the twins currently walking across the room and folding themselves into twere calling her mom, and she was holding them like she had spent 10 minutes being terrified, and she was looking at him over their heads with an expression that was not one emotion but many stacked on top of each other, none of which he had earned the right to ask about yet. His mouth fell open. He closed it. He opened it again. Prudent. If you want to see how this story unfolds, grab a popcorn and relax because this story is going to take you on a wild ride, and don't forget to hit the subscription button. Drop a comment telling me what city you are watching from and like. I love seeing how far this story travel. 19 years old Prudent. 1 carry-on suitcase. The specific, electric ambition of a person who has been handed a single extraordinary chance and intends to break it open. That was how Prudent Okafor arrived in Seoul. The city received her the way large, confident cities receive arrivals, without ceremony and without apology, fully expecting you to keep up. The cold was sharper than she expected. The noise was louder. The lights were so bright at night that the sky over the city never fully darkened. She loved it immediately. Her Korean, assembled painstakingly across 2 years of free internet resources, borrowed textbooks, and conversations with anyone she could find who was willing, was better than anyone expected. Better than she let on, in the first weeks, because she had learned early that being underestimated in a language was a useful intelligence-gathering position. She found her dormitory. She organized her space. She created a schedule on the back of a notebook and pinned it above her desk. Then her roommate, GR, informed her that not going to the freshman welcome party was socially illegal. Prudent did not want to go. She went anyway, because GR had the specific and unstoppable energy of someone for whom social events were a biological imperative, and because GR had also, somehow, done Prudent's eyeliner while she was still in the process of objecting. The party was in the grand hall of the student union, crowded, expensive-smelling, filled with people performing the version of themselves they had brought to university as an opening bid. Prudent stood near the drinks table and watched it all. Do-yoon Kwon, on the other side of the room, was not looking for anyone. He was 20 years old, the heir to one of Seoul's most established business families, and he wore that fact the way some people wear very good shoes, effortlessly, and without thinking about it. He was also, by the uncontested agreement of everyone in the room, the most compelling presence there, which was why he looked slightly bored. When you have been the most interesting thing in the room since you were 15, the room stops being interesting. He saw her laugh. And something in him that had been running at a low, comfortable idle suddenly changed gear without his permission. He found a reason to be near the drinks table. Then a second reason. Then a third reason, at which point she turned and looked at him with the full, direct, completely unimpressed attention of a person who has clocked what you are doing and finds it transparent. She told him there was nothing on that side of the table he actually needed. He told her she was correct, and that he had been attempting to talk to her. She looked at him for a moment, weighing, measuring, arriving at a verdict, and told him to talk. Then he did. What followed was 4 months that Prudent would spend the rest of her life attempting, without much success, to make smaller. Because the problem with Du-Yoon was that he was nothing she had expected. She had expected arrogance. She had met his surface arrogance and moved through it in the first 30 minutes. What was behind it was something else entirely. Genuine curiosity. The attentiveness of a person who listened not to wait for their turn to speak but because other people were actually interesting. A dry, understated humor that he deployed quietly and then retreated from, as though he wanted you to discover it rather than be shown it. He remembered every detail she told him. Not the important ones, every one. The name of her youngest sibling. The song her father played on Sunday mornings. The exact brand of notebook she had glanced at in a bookshop window and then passed because the price was impractical. That notebook appeared on her desk 3 days later with a note that said only, for the schedule. She stood there for a long moment and felt something move in her chest that she had not been expecting and was not entirely prepared for. They studied in the library until security removed them. They wandered Seoul at the hours when the city had stopped performing for visitors and was simply itself, quieter, more honest, lit differently. They argued about economics with the competitive pleasure of people who both intended to win and both found the match more enjoyable than any victory would be. Then one evening, on the rooftop of his apartment building, he stopped talking mid-sentence and looked at her. She asked what. He told her he loved her. She sat with it for a moment. Not for theater. Because it was a large thing and she respected large things enough to give them a second. Then she told him she loved him too. He kissed her and they did what lovers do. The city moved below them, 10 million lives, entirely indifferent. And the two of them stood in the middle of something they had not planned and could not stop and, for 4 months, did not try to. The campus found out on a Tuesday. It arrived the way catastrophic information always arrives, in pieces first, scattered and unconfirmed, and then all at once in a flood that takes everything. Du-Yoon Kwon. Engaged. Childhood arrangement. A woman named Yoona Park. Families aligned since they were children. There is a photograph. GR showed her the photograph on a phone screen pulled from a business publication. Du-Yoon and a composed, beautiful woman named Yoona, standing together at some formal function, printed beside an announcement that had clearly been placed with care. Prudent called him. The phone rang. Cut to voicemail. She called again. Nothing. He was in Hong Kong, a business trip with his father, his roommate told her, and the phone had been off since the morning before. There was no timeline for his return. She waited. 2 days later she missed her period. She stared at the calendar as though it might negotiate. It did not. She went to the pharmacy, stood in the flat bathroom for 3 minutes afterward and looked at the result and felt the world, which had been full and loud and moving forward at speed, go absolutely, comprehensively silent. Du-Yoon's mother came the next morning. She was a small woman. Immaculate. She carried herself the way people carry themselves when they have spent a lifetime using their posture as a weapon. She came with Yoona, who was beautiful and precise and looked at Prudent with an expression that functioned as pity but was built from something significantly less kind. Prudent would not describe what happened in that room. Not to GR, not to her mother, not to any person in the years that followed. The words used, about what she was, about what she was worth, about what the Kwon family had and did not have room for, how she would be swallowed and buried without trace if she didn't leave the country. She sealed away in a part of herself she did not open. The envelope was placed on the table. $50,000. Prudent looked at the envelope. She looked at the woman who had raised the man she loved. She looked at Yoona, who was beautiful and cold and entirely willing to be present for this. She did not cry. Not there. Not in front of them. That was the one thing she could control in a room that had taken everything else away from her. She took the envelope. She took the envelope because she was alone in a country that was not hers, pregnant, with nothing and no one, and the person she had believed in was in Hong Kong with his phone off. She booked a flight to the United States before dawn. She packed her carry-on in under 20 minutes. She moved through Incheon Airport in the dark with the focused, furious purpose of a woman who had decided, somewhere between the bathroom floor and the boarding gate, that this would not be the end of her story. It was the end of something. But not her. New York in November was grey and blunt and completely unwilling to make accommodations for a 19-year-old woman arriving from Seoul with $50,000, a business school acceptance, and a secret she was carrying in her body. She worked. Not one job, 4, at various intervals. She slept between them, stuttered in the cracks, sat her exams on the days her eyes burned from the hours she'd spent trying to hold all of it together. In the spring, she gave birth to twins. She lay in the hospital bed afterward and held one in each arm, a boy and a girl, impossibly small, impossibly complete, and looked at them with the attention of a woman taking in something that has permanently reorganized her understanding of what matters. The boy had his father's jaw. 40 minutes old, and already his father's jaw. The girl had her mother's eyes. Already watching. Already cataloguing. Sean, she said to the boy. Simi, she said to the girl. You arrived into this world already fierce. Stay that way. They listened. They stayed that way. They stayed that way so thoroughly and so consistently that fierce was almost too small a word for what they became. Sean read at 4. Full novels, discussed at dinner with critical precision. He had his father's intelligence and his mother's refusal to accept inefficiency and the specific personal quality of a child who had watched a woman build an entire life alone and had absorbed it as a fundamental truth about what human beings are capable of. Simi's first full sentence, at 13 months, was already structured as an argument. By 17 months she was correcting factual errors made by adults twice her height, with a polite but thorough manner of someone who felt that allowing incorrect information to circulate in a room was a form of disorder she was personally responsible for eliminating. Together they were a force. The word was precise and not metaphorical. They moved through rooms the way significant weather systems move, noticed, felt, impossible to ignore. They protected their mother with the territorial tenderness of two people who had spent their whole lives watching her be the most extraordinary person in every space she entered and had decided that she deserved to be treated accordingly, at all times, by everyone. They also made her laugh until she could not breathe. She graduated from business school in May of their 3rd year. Sean and Simi sat in the front row, 3 years old, dressed like small expensive professionals, clapping with a force that made several adults around them turn to look. A woman beside them leaned over and asked if they were clapping for someone special. Simi turned to her with complete sincerity and said their mother was the best person in the room. The woman smiled, assuming it was the adorable hyperbole of a child. It was not hyperbole. In the years that followed, Prudence climbed. She climbed the way she had always done everything, methodically, completely, and with the particular focus of someone who knows that excellence is the only currency that does not depend on anyone else. Director of a company that had not existed when she arrived in New York. A reputation that preceded her in rooms she had not yet entered. 2 children who were, by any objective measure, the most interesting people she had ever met. She steered wide of Seoul. Wide of any connection to Korea's business community that might carry the name Kwon in its orbit. She built her life with both hands and she guarded it fiercely, because she had learned what happened when she stopped guarding it. She told herself she was not running. She was not sure she entirely believed herself, but she had learned that there are things you carry forward rather than examine, and that moving fast enough covers a great deal of ground. Then a partnership deal landed on her desk. She opened the file, checked the company profile. And she went still. Seoul-based. Korean partner. On-site negotiation. Director-level Korean fluency required. Minimum 6 weeks. A partnership deal. Seoul-based. Requiring a director-level lead with Korean fluency, international corporate experience, and the kind of professional gravitas that came from years of building something from nothing. Her resume, unhelpfully, described her in precise and devastating detail. She called her Chief Executive Officer. Reassign me. Prudent. I'll take anything else. The Lagos brief. The Dubai restructuring. I will personally fly to Antarctica if there is a penguin that needs consulting. Her CEO, a sensible woman who had survived 15 years of corporate politics and 2 hostile takeovers, paused. There are no other leads with Korean fluency at your level. Train someone. In 3 weeks. People learn quickly under pressure. Prudent. CEO voice went gentle in that way that meant the answer is no, and we both know it. The company needs this deal. You're the only one who can close it. I'm sorry. She spent the next 4 days trying everything. She drafted a proposal to hire an external consultant. She researched Korean-speaking directors at 2 competitor firms and briefly, shamefully, considered approaching one. She even opened her laptop at 2 in the morning and stared at a language learning website for 45 minutes before closing it, and accepting that there was no version of this where she did not get on a plane. She booked the flight on a Thursday. She stared at the confirmation email for a long time. Seoul, Republic of Korea. Departure, the 23rd of March. 8 years. She had built 8 years of careful, deliberate distance, and one business deal was about to fold it like paper. She told herself it was fine. Seoul was a city of 10 million people. The odds of encountering one specific man were statistically negligible. She was a professional. She had a job to do. She would do it, collect her commission, and leave. She almost believed herself. Sean and Simi received the news of Seoul with the enthusiasm of people who had been waiting for something interesting to happen. Seoul. Simi said, already pulling up travel content on her tablet. I've always wanted to go. You've never mentioned Seoul once in your life, Prudent said. I've been thinking it privately. Sean was already making a list. He was 7 years old and he made lists the way other children breathed, constantly, reflexively, with great seriousness. Things to try, he announced, pen moving. Korean barbecue. Bingsu. Tteokbokki. Street corn if they have it. They have corn, Simi confirmed without looking up. Excellent. Prudent looked at her 2 children, 2 small, bright-eyed, terrifyingly competent people who had her stubbornness and someone else's cheekbones and absolutely no concept of why this trip made her stomach feel like it was filled with cold water. And she thought, not for the first time, I would burn the world down for you. I would also very much like you to stop being so cheerful about Seoul specifically. Shoes, she said instead. Pack practical ones. Seoul received them with grey skies and the smell of rain on concrete and the particular noise of a city that never quite went quiet. Prudence stepped out of the airport into air that tasted like memory, and she made herself breathe through it. Just air. Just a city. 10 million people. Statistically negligible. Mom, Sean said, appearing at her elbow with his rolling suitcase and his list. I've ranked the food stops by distance from the flat. Shall I present the itinerary? Not now, baby. I've color-coded it. Sean. He folded it back into his pocket with the patience of a man who knew his moment would come. The flat her company had secured was clean and high-ceilinged, with windows that looked over a stretch of the Han River. Simi pressed her entire face against the glass. Sean began opening cabinets with the methodical focus of someone conducting an inspection. Prudence sat on the edge of the bed in the master room and stared at the wall and told herself she was fine. She was fine. If you want to see how this story unfolds, grab a popcorn and relax because this story is going to take you on a wild ride, and please don't forget to hit the subscription button, drop a comment. The business signing party was held in a glass and steel venue in Gangnam that was the architectural equivalent of someone trying very hard to appear effortless. Prudent wore black, sharp, no-nonsense, armor in fabric form, and arrived with Sean and Simi at her sides because the hotel babysitter had cancelled at the last minute and she had made the executive decision that her children were mature enough to sit quietly for 2 hours. This was, in retrospect, a decision she would reflect on with some bitterness. You will sit in these chairs, she told them, pointing to 2 seats near the wall with excellent sightlines and no proximity to anything breakable. You will eat the food if it comes to you. You will not speak to strangers. You will not wander. You will not, she looked at Sean specifically, conduct any surveys. That was 1 time, Sean said. It was 4 times. The data was valuable. Chairs, she said. Both of you. I will be back in 7 minutes. She walked toward the restroom with the confidence of a woman who had raised 2 children and therefore trusted nothing, and she was right not to, because she had been gone approximately 4 minutes when Simi spotted a man sitting alone near the window and said, with the instincts of someone who had never once in her life left a stranger in peace, he looks lonely. Sean assessed the situation. He does. We should sit with him. Mom said no strangers. Simi considered this. She said, "Don't talk to strangers. If we go sit next to him quietly, we are not really talking." Sean thought about it. That's a very specific interpretation. I'm a very specific person. They picked up their glasses of juice and walked over. "Can we sit with you?" They did not wait for a full answer. Simi was already pulling out the chair on his left. Sean was already settling into the one on his right, straightening his blazer with the efficiency of someone who had just conducted a strategic deployment and was satisfied with its execution. The man, broad-shouldered, impeccably suited, with the kind of face that made rooms adjust themselves around it, looked down at them. Then he went very still. Not the still of a man being patient with children. The still of a man who has just looked at two faces and felt something in the earth beneath him shift without warning. They looked exactly like him though he looked at the boy. The jaw, the brow, the exact angle at which the eyes sat in the face, all of it arriving at him like information he already knew. He looked at the girl. Same jaw. Same brow. Same eyes, watching him with the calm, thorough attention of someone conducting an inspection. He looked at both of them again. His hand moved to set down his drink, slowly, the way a person moves when they do not trust their own grip. He asked, "Where did you come from?" And they understood immediately. Simi's arm extended, finger pointing without drama, directly at the restroom corridor. Do Yoon Kwon nodded. He sat with these two children who wore his own face as though it had always belonged to them, and he waited. Across the room, Prudent Okafor came out of the restroom, and looked toward the table where she had left her children. Her children were not there. She did not scream. She was not that kind of woman. She scanned, left quadrant, right quadrant, center, and found nothing. She moved through the crowd without touching anyone, her face arranged into the expression she wore when she was managing a crisis without announcing it, which was the same expression she wore in boardrooms and every other room that had tried to reduce her. She moved. She looked. She moved again. 10 minutes in, a voice cut clean through the noise of the party. "Mom." "Sean." She turned. Her eyes swept the room, and landed on Sean. And the blood in her veins turned to something colder than blood. Sean and Simi were walking toward her, perfectly fine, perfectly composed, slightly smug in the way they always were when they had technically not broken any rules. Behind them, a man was rising from his chair. Do-yoon turned at Sean's voice. And time, which had been moving normally up until that point, stopped entirely to the woman he had been searching for across 8 years, across 2 continents, across every investigation and dead-end and sleepless calculation, was standing 20 feet away with the twins currently walking across the room and folding themselves into Twe, calling her mom. And she was holding them like she had spent 10 minutes being terrified. And she was looking at him over their heads with an expression that was not one emotion but many stacked on top of each other, none of which he had earned the right to ask about yet. His mouth fell open. He closed it. He opened it again. Prudent. She stood up slowly. The twins were on either side of her now, each holding one of her hands, each watching him with the identical careful attention of people who had spent 8 years constructing an understanding of the world and were now being presented with information that reorganized several of its assumptions. Simi's head tilted approximately 3 degrees. Sean's arms moved toward folded. Do-yoon was looking at her like she was the answer to a question that had been running in him for so long, had become the question beneath all other questions. The shock was still there, undisguised, because the impact had been too fast for even him to armor over it. But underneath the shock was something else. Something that was older and quieter and significantly more dangerous. Prudent felt it from 20 feet away and did not let herself feel it back. She looked at him with the precise neutrality of a woman who had once felt every version of this and had subsequently built an entire personality in the place where the feeling used to live. She thanked him. 2 words. Clipped and correct and designed to end the transaction. She turned. She walked. Prudent. She stopped. She didn't turn around for a moment. Just stood there, spine straight, and he could see her deciding something. Then she faced him. Not here. Then where? The twins, pressed against her sides, were looking between the 2 adults with the focused attention of people watching something they didn't yet fully understand but were absolutely committing to memory. Outside, she said. 5 minutes. The air outside was cooler than the party, quieter. A line of cars sat along the curb. She had sent the children back inside with a look that communicated sit down and do not move with the kind of maternal precision that required no words. She turned to face him on the pavement. He looked, she catalogued this against her will, Exactly like she remembered. 8 years and he stood in the same way, held himself the same way, looked at her with the same expression that had once made her foolish enough to believe it meant something permanent. "Where did you go?" he said. The audacity of it almost made her laugh. Almost. "Where did I go?" she repeated. "You disappeared. No call, no message, nothing. I looked for you, Prudent, I looked for months. Your mother," she said, "came to my door." His mouth closed. 3 weeks after you left for Hong Kong. She came to my door, and she told me that my presence in your life was an embarrassment to your family, and that a suitable match had been arranged, and that if I contacted you or made any kind of scene, she would ensure that every door in this industry closed permanently in my face. She watched him absorb this. She gave me money. She told me to use it to go somewhere quiet and start over. Her voice did not shake. She had rehearsed this conversation in her head 1,000 times, alone in hospital corridors, in the dark after the twins finally slept, on every flight and in every boardroom where she had rebuilt herself piece by piece. She was not going to shake now. I was 19 years old. I was alone in a country that wasn't mine. And I was pregnant. The word landed on him like something physical. "So I left," she said. "Because I had no other options. Because your mother made very sure of that. Because Yuna was already being announced as your fiancé by the time I got on that plane. And I had already understood, very clearly, what my place in your life actually was." A taxi rounded the corner, indicator blinking. "That's mine," she said. "Prudent. Good night, Do-yoon." She got into the taxi. He stood on the pavement and watched the car until the taillights disappeared, and then he stood there a while longer, alone with everything she had said and the full and terrible weight of what he had not known. He had not slept. This was evident to anyone with eyes, which unfortunately included Sean and Simi when they arrived at his corporate building the following morning with their mother for the first day of partnership proceedings. Prudent had spent the taxi ride home and the subsequent hours running through worst-case scenarios, strategic contingencies, and the specific logistics of whether she could complete this deal entirely by email. She had concluded, with great reluctance, that she could not. So she had put on her sharpest blazer, collected her children, and arrived at the Han De-yoon Corporation lobby as though she had not appended his entire understanding of the last 8 years the previous evening. She was signing in at reception when she became aware that the twins were no longer flanking her. She turned. Across the lobby, De-yoon was standing near the elevator bank, speaking quietly to an aide. He had not yet noticed her. He was, however, being approached by 2 small people with rolling backpacks. "Stop," Prudent said, already moving. She was not fast enough. Sean stopped approximately 1 meter from De-yoon, feet together, and said, in a clear and carrying voice, "Excuse me." De-yoon turned. "Your staring," Sean said, "is unprofessional." De-yoon blinked. Simi arrived beside her brother and added, helpfully, "We noticed last night and again just now. Our mother is clearly not comfortable, and you should be aware of how you're making people feel." "It's a professional environment," Sean agreed. "Standards matter." The aide beside De-yoon had frozen. 2 other employees passing through the lobby had slowed considerably. De-yoon crouched down slowly, bringing himself to their level. He looked at them, these 2 children who had his jaw in his eyes and apparently his mother's complete inability to let things go unaddressed. "You're right," he said quietly. "That was inconsiderate. I apologize." The twins exchanged a glance. This response, apparently, had not been predicted. "Thank you," Simi said, recalibrating. "That was mature." "Your handshake is still good," Sean added, generously. "That stands." "I was once your mother's friend," De-yoon said. A pause. "You're clearly not friends anymore," Sean said, arms folding with the authority of a much older and significantly more tired person. "So I suggest you take some time to reflect on whatever happened and stop making it her problem." Prudent arrived at her children's backs. She put a hand on each of their shoulders, which was partly affection and partly ensuring they did not continue prosecuting this case any further. "Please excuse them," she said. "Don't apologize for us," Simi said. "We were making a valid point." "We were," Sean confirmed. Prudent looked at De-yoon over the tops of their heads. "I want to say this clearly. Stay away from me, and stay away from my children." Something shifted in his expression, not anger exactly, but the complicated look of a man who had been absorbing difficult information for the past 12 hours and had reached a point. "You took them from me," he said quietly. "Whatever happened, whatever my mother did, you knew they existed and you left." I was 19 and terrified. "I understand that." His voice was still low. "I'm not saying it wasn't impossible. I'm saying you made a decision and I had no choice in it." The lobby was very quiet. Simi looked up at Prudent. Prudent looked at Du-Yoon. Du-Yoon looked back at her, steady and wrecked in equal measure, and the full, complicated unfairness of all of it sat between them like something that could not be neatly resolved by any single person being simply wrong. "This is a difficult conversation," Sean announced to no one in particular. "That should happen somewhere private and not in a lobby with approximately 9 witnesses. 11, Simi corrected. Everyone looked. She pointed. 2 additional staff had materialized near the corridor. 11 witnesses, Sean revised, and some of them are taking notes. The note arrived in Du-Yoon's jacket pocket at some point during the morning meetings. He discovered it at 11, during a bathroom break, a small square of paper, folded 3 times, written in pencil in the deliberate printing of a child who had been taught proper letter forms and taken the instructions seriously. 23 Hangang Dero, Flat 4B. 6 p.m. We have questions and expect answers. Please arrive on time. Punctuality is respect. Note: do not tell our mother we sent this. Du-Yoon stood in the bathroom of his own corporation and read a meeting summons issued by 2 7-year-olds, and for the first time in 24 hours, something that might eventually become a smile moved briefly across his face. He folded the note and put it back in his pocket. He arrived at 6. Sean opened the door. He looked Du-Yoon up and down with an expression of evaluation, then stepped back and gestured him inside with the hospitality of a host who had thought carefully about the staging. The flat was warm. It smelled of something that had been cooked for dinner, rice, something spiced. The windows showed the river going dark in the early evening. "She's putting laundry away," Sean said, taking Du-Yoon's jacket with the confidence of someone who had done this before and directing him to the sofa. "We have approximately 12 minutes before she comes back. Please sit." Du-Yoon Saturday. Simi emerged from the hallway with 2 glasses of water, one of which she placed in front of Du-Yoon with the professionalism of someone running a structured interview, and took the seat across from him. "Right," she said. "Let's begin." Du-Yoon looked at her. He looked at Sean, who had taken a seat beside his sister with his hands folded and his expression absolutely serious. "You got our mother pregnant," Simi said, "abandoned her, and ran off with another woman. Is this true?" The words were so direct that Du-Yoon almost needed a moment to confirm he had actually heard them. "No," he said. "That is not what happened." "Then tell us what happened," Sean said. "From the beginning. And please be factual. We are not interested in how things felt, we want events in sequence." Du-Yoon thought about the last 2 days. He thought about everything that had collapsed and rearranged itself. He thought about 2 children who had found him in a crowded room and sat down beside him, and who were now sitting across from him in an organized meeting they had personally called, waiting for his account of events with the patience and precision of people who intended to make their own determination. He thought about Prudent at 19, alone, with a pregnancy and a one-way ticket and his mother's threats still ringing in her ears. He thought about the 8 years he had spent not knowing. 3 weeks after I left for Hong Kong, he said, my mother told me that Prudent had taken money and gone back to London. That she had met someone else. That she had moved on. He paused. I didn't believe it at first. I tried to reach her, for months. Her number was disconnected. Her space was empty. Everyone she'd known in Seoul said they hadn't heard from her. He kept his voice level. Your mother was telling the truth last night. My mother went to her. She made promises and threats and she gave her money, and she told me an entirely different story, and he stopped. I believed her. Eventually. Because I had nothing else. Silence. Simi was watching him with her mother's eyes. And the other woman? Yuna. An arrangement my mother made while I was in Hong Kong. I refused it. The engagement lasted 4 months. It ended. You never married her? Sean asked. Never. Another silence. The children exchanged one of their looks, the particular telegraphic communication of twins who have been talking to each other since before language. What do you want? Simi asked. Du-Yoon met her eyes. To be here. To make up for the time I didn't know about. To be. The word was simple and enormous. Present. Our mom's grandmother isn't going to like that, Sean said, with the informational neutrality of a news correspondent. My mother. Yours, Sean clarified. Mrs. Han. Do-yoon held their gaze. I run the family. I have for 3 years. No one touches your mother or you without going through me first. That I can promise you. Simi leaned back slightly. Filed this. Sean unfolded a piece of paper, another one, because of course there was another one, and smoothed it on his knee. I have a few conditions, he said. Do-yoon nodded. You come regularly. Not sporadically. Not when work allows. Regularly. We define the schedule and you commit to it. He looked up. Second, if you say you'll be there, you're there. We have already had one person in our lives who made promises and broke them, and we are not interested in repeating that experience. He said this without weight or drama, simply as a statement of established fact, and it landed on Do-yoon harder than any accusation. Third, whatever happens between you and our mother is between you and our mother. You do not put us in the middle. You do not use us to have conversations with her. You do not make us choose. Agreed, Do-yoon said. All three. I'll need that in writing, Sean said. Do-yoon looked at him. You want a written agreement. I want a written agreement. A pause. Then Do-yoon reached into his jacket, produced a business card, and turned it over to its blank side. Do you have a pen? Sean produced one from his pocket with the efficiency of someone who always carried a pen because he always needed one. They wrote the terms. Do-yoon signed it. Sean countersigned it with his full name, Sean Okofa, in the careful capitals of a child who understood that signatures were serious business. Simi observed all of this. Then she said, Have you ever had bingsu? Do-yoon blinked at the pivot. Yes. I grew up here. Is the kind near Insadong worth the walk? It's worth a taxi. Good to know. She relaxed, something shifting in her posture, the formal interview giving way to something warmer and more tentative. Sean wants to try everything. We've been working through a list. Your list is a good idea, Do-yoon said. There's a market near the old palace that has things you won't find anywhere else. Sean looked up from folding the signed agreement very carefully. What kinds of things? Hotiok. Pajeon. Fish cake soup, which I understand sounds terrible. It doesn't sound terrible, Simi said immediately. It sounds extremely good, Sean agreed, recapping his pen. Can you take us? If your mother allows it. They both turned to look at the hallway. Prudence had emerged at some point in the last several minutes and was standing at its entrance, leaning against the wall with the expression of someone who was not entirely sure when she lost control of the situation, or whether she had ever had it to begin with. She looked at Do-yoon. She looked at her children. She looked at the small square of paper Sean was now tucking into his backpack. How long have you been standing there? Sean asked. Long enough, she said. How long is that exactly? Sean. He subsided. She pushed off the wall and came into the room, settling into the armchair that was neither the sofa where Do-yoon sat nor the position she had apparently been holding in the hallway for an indeterminate number of minutes. She looked at him across the space of the flat, and something complex and exhausted moved through her face. The fish cake soup is actually good, she said finally. I'd forgotten that. A small mercy. He took it. After the twins announced, with the authority of people who had completed their objectives for the evening, that they were going to bed, and after Prudence had taken the 20 minutes to get them settled, she came back out to find him still in the sitting room. She had half expected him to leave. She wasn't sure whether the fact that he hadn't made things easier or harder. She Saturday. Not close. The armchair again. They sat in silence for 2 full minutes. She counted. Then he said, I looked for you. I know, she said. I believe you. I want to say this properly. He was looking at the middle distance, choosing his words the way someone picks their way across uncertain ground. My mother's actions are not something I can undo. What she said to you, what she threatened, what she took from you, from all of us, a breath. There is no version of an apology that covers that. But I want to say it anyway. I'm sorry. For every night you spent alone. For every year I wasn't there. For a woman and 2 children who deserved better than what they got from my family. She listened to this. She let it sit where it landed. I spent years looking for you, he continued. I'm not saying that so you'll feel responsible for it. I'm saying it so you know, you were never forgotten. You were never replaced. You were, he stopped. You were the thing I couldn't fix. The room was very quiet. Outside, Sol continued its indifference to the small private enormity happening in flat 4B. I want to start again, he said. Whatever that means. Whatever you'll allow. I want to be here for them, but I want to be here for you too, and I know that's not something you can just, he shook his head. I know what you're carrying. I know I don't get to simply walk back in and ask you to set it down. He looked at her then, and the look was the same one she remembered, the one she had spent 8 years trying to forget, and 8 years being quietly furious at herself for not managing it. Tell me what you need, he said. And I'll do it. However long it takes. She looked at him for a long time. I forgive you, she said. It came out without ceremony, without drama, the way something true and long overdue often does. Not because it was fine. It wasn't fine. But because I've been carrying that particular weight for 8 years and I'm tired. She held his gaze. But forgiveness isn't, she searched for the word, reconstruction. I'm not built for that right now. I don't know if I'm built for it at all. He waited. You can see them, she said. Be their father. Show up the way Sean's document requires, a brief, helpless almost smile, and I will not stand in the way of that. That is what I can give you right now. Then I'll wait, he said. It was not a performance. It was not the declaration of a man who expected the waiting to be short or the outcome to be certain. It was simply a statement of what he intended to do, made by someone who had already spent 8 years in a different kind of waiting and understood, now, that patience was not the same as passivity. She nodded once. Something settled in her, not resolved, not healed, but quieter. The market, she said, after a moment. Near the old palace. Yes. The Hodiok. It's good. It's the best I've had anywhere. She was quiet for a moment. Saturday, she said. If you're available. The 4 of us. He looked at her. Don't make a thing of it, she said. I'm not. You're doing the face. What face? The one Sean identified last night. She stood, pulling her cardigan around her. Saturday. 10 o'clock. And you're buying the Hodiok because you have 8 years to make up for, and we are starting with pastry. She went to bed. He sat for another moment in the quiet flat, with the sound of the city below and 2 children asleep in the back room who had his face and their mother's spine and had produced a legally binding document from a piece of card and a ballpoint pen, and he felt something shift in his chest for the second time in 2 days. The first time had been when he saw them. This time it was something else. Something that had been very cold for a very long time, sitting in the warmth of a flat above the Han River, considering the possibility that it might, slowly, carefully, with Hodiok and a signed agreement and 2 children who would absolutely enforce the terms, begin to thaw. He let himself out quietly, and he smiled for the first time in 8 years, and the Sol night received him like something that had been expected. Saturday was 4 days away. He counted them already. Please subscribe, like and comment. Thank you. Han Myung-suk was on her second cup of tea when her son walked in. She heard the front door, the particular sound of it, unhurried but deliberate, and looked up from her cup with the expression of a woman who had been raised never to show surprise and had, over 71 years, become very good at it. Do-yoon stood in the entrance of the dining room in yesterday's suit jacket, no tie, and the specific stillness of a person who had been awake all night deciding exactly what he was going to say. Sit down, she said. I'll have them make breakfast. I'm not staying for breakfast. She set her cup down. Something in his voice, not raised, not broken, simply flat in a way she had never heard from him, made the fine hair on her arm stand up. You knew, he said. She said nothing. 8 years. He came into the room but did not sit. He stood across the table from her, and he looked at her the way you look at someone when you are trying to understand how you did not see something sooner. 8 years, and you sat across from me at this table, this specific table, at your specific request, every Sunday, and you watched me. He stopped. Collected himself. Started again. I grieved her. I want you to understand that. I spent 8 years grieving a woman I thought had chosen to leave, and the entire time you were the reason she was gone. Myung-suk's jaw was very tight. I did what was necessary for this family. She was pregnant. The word dropped into the room like a stone into still water. His mother's face did something complicated, something that moved through shock and then tried to arrive at composure, but the journey took too long, and he saw all of it. You didn't know, he said. Not a question. Something in him acknowledged this and offered it no mercy. Or you didn't ask. Either way. Do-yoon. I have 2 children. His voice finally broke, not into tears, into something rougher and more fundamental than that, the sound of a structure showing its first crack. I have a 7-year-old son who makes lists and negotiates contracts, and I have a 7-year-old daughter who looks at people like she's already decided what she thinks of them. And I have missed 7 years of both of them, and the reason I have missed them is sitting in this room drinking tea. The silence that followed was the loudest thing Myung-suk had heard in a very long time. She would not have been right for you, his mother said finally. Quietly. She was. Do not. One word. Absolute. Whatever you are about to say, do not say it in this house. He left the table. She heard him on the stairs. Then, unmistakably, the particular sound of suitcase wheels on the upper hallway floor. She stood up. Do-yoon. He came back into view on the landing, a suitcase in each hand, moving with the unhurried efficiency of a man who had decided something and was done deciding it. You are not leaving this house. I am. He reached the bottom of the stairs. When Prudent forgives you, if she forgives you, we will discuss what comes next. Until then, this is the last conversation we are having. You cannot simply. I run this family, he said. Still calm. Devastatingly calm. You taught me that. You spent 30 years teaching me that the family comes first and the family protects its own. He met her eyes. She was mine. They are mine. And you remove them. He picked up his cases. I learned from the best. He walked out the front door. It closed behind him. Not a slam, just a firm and final click. Han Myung-suk stood at the bottom of a staircase in a house that had always been full of managed noise and movement and staff and the particular ambient hum of a family that ran things, and she listened to a silence she had never once, in 71 years, heard inside these walls. It was very loud. He showed up at flat 4B at 8:30 that morning with 2 paper bags from the bakery 2 streets over and dark circles under his eyes that he had not bothered to hide. Simi opened the door. She looked at the bags. She looked at him. She looked at the bags again. Red bean, he said, and plain butter. I didn't know which you preferred. Both, she said, and stepped aside. The flat was in its morning state. Sean at the kitchen table with a book propped against a cereal box. Prudent in a blazer she was still buttoning, phone wedged between her shoulder and ear. She saw him over the top of the phone, stopped buttoning for exactly 1 second, and then continued buttoning. He set the bags on the counter, found the kettle without being told where it was, second shelf, left side, because of course he'd noted it the evening before, and put it on. Yes, Prudent was saying into the phone. The amended clause goes to their legal team by end of day. I've already. A pause. She glanced at Do-yoon, who was now locating mugs with the calm confidence of a man on a mission. I'll call you back. She hung up. What are you doing? Making tea. I can see that. Why are you in my kitchen? I brought breakfast. He turned. I was in the neighborhood. You live in Hanam-dong. I was passing through. She looked at him, really looked, the way she'd been carefully not looking for the past 2 days, with the full attention she used on contracts and people she was trying to understand. The dark circles. The same jacket. The quality of stillness in him that was different from his usual stillness. Quieter. Heavier. What happened? She said. Nothing. Do-yoon. Breakfast first, he said. And the kettle clicked, and he turned back to it, and that was apparently all she was getting for now. What happened next was not a grand announcement. It did not have a name, at first. It was simply, Do-yoon showing up. Every day for the remainder of her time in Seoul. He took them to the market near the old palace on Saturday, as agreed. Sean tried the hotteok and then went very quiet in the way he went quiet when something had exceeded expectations, and he needed a moment to update his internal rankings. Simi ate hers in 4 bites, said again, and held out a hand. Do-yoon bought her another. Prudence stood eating hers beside him, watching their children move through the market with the focused enthusiasm of two people on a research mission, and she thought about how the three of them moved together already. Sean checking with Diyun before running ahead, Simi explaining things to him with the authority of a child who has just learned something and considers it her duty to distribute the knowledge. Diyun listening to both of them with the complete attention of a man who was aware of what he had missed and was not going to miss anything else. It was the most painful and the most unexpectedly peaceful afternoon she had had in 8 years. "Stop thinking so loudly," Diyun said beside her. "I'm not thinking loudly. You do this thing with your jaw when you're processing something you don't want to feel." She turned to look at him. "You've always done it," he said, eyes still on the twins ahead. "Since I've known you." She faced forward again. She ate her hodioke. She did not say anything about the fact that he had apparently spent the past 24 years cataloguing her habits, because acknowledging that would require her to acknowledge something she had decided not to acknowledge yet. Her jaw was doing the thing. She stopped it. When the soul work concluded and Prudent booked 3 seats back to New York, she told herself that would be the natural pause point. The practical end of proximity. He would go back to running his company and she would go back to running hers, and the children would have a father who video called and sent excessive gifts, because Sean had already informed Diyun, in some sidebar conversation she had not been present for, that his birthday was in 4 months and he had opinions, and that would be the workable shape of things. She landed at JFK on a Wednesday evening. Diyun landed on Friday. Private jet. No delays. No excuses. He showed up at her door at 10 in the morning with a duffel bag and the same unhurried expression he'd worn standing in her kitchen in Seoul, and when she opened the door and stared at him, he said, simply, "I told Sean I'd take him to the Natural History Museum this weekend. He said there's a specific dinosaur exhibit." "The Titanosaur," Simi called from somewhere inside the flat. "I haven't agreed to any of this," Prudent said. "Mom," Sean said, appearing behind her. "He came from Seoul. Let him in." She let him in. She told herself this was about the children. She told herself this every weekend for 6 weeks, while Diyun arrived on Friday and left on Sunday, and in between managed to become, without any particular announcement, a fixture, knowing where the extra blankets were, knowing which drawer had the good scissors, knowing that Sunday mornings had a specific rhythm and that disrupting it by arriving before 10:30 was not advisable. "You're getting comfortable," she said to him on the 4th weekend, when she came into the kitchen and found him frying eggs at a stove in a way that suggested he'd done it before. "I'm trying not to inconvenience you," he said, which was such a serene non-answer that she had no immediate response for it. She sat down at the kitchen island. He set a plate in front of her. She ate the eggs. They were excellent. She told herself it meant nothing. The weekend it happened was the 6th one. Prudent had a work commitment, a call with partners in Dubai that had been rescheduled twice and could not be moved again, running until 9 in the evening. She had arranged coverage, but coverage fell through at 4, and at 4:15 she was standing in her hallway weighing options when her phone rang. "Diyun," she answered before she finished the thought. "I'm already in the neighborhood," he said. Which, she had come to understand, was Diyun language for "I know something's happening and I'm already on my way, but I'm phrasing it as coincidence to give you the option of saying no. If you need someone to hold things down." She said yes. Diyun took Sean and Simi and went to his flat. She went his flat at 9:47 to find the flat quiet. She knocked. The door opened. Diyun stood in the doorway in a towel. His hair still damp from a shower, water catching the hallway light on his collarbones, which she was absolutely not looking at, with a completely unbothered expression of a man who had done nothing wrong and was confused about why the situation might require any particular reaction. Prudence stared at him. He stared back. "Sorry," he said, not sounding sorry. "The kids had a disagreement about the terms of a board game that escalated, and there was juice involved, and I ended up." "Where are the kids?" she said. "Sleeping." "Come in," he said. She came in. She stepped past him, which required navigating the fact that the towel situation was happening approximately 12 inches to her right, and entered the flat with the dignity and composure of a trained professional who had survived international negotiations and was not going to be undone by wet hair and good bone structure. She was undone, slightly. She stood in the kitchen with her back to the hallway and examined the middle distance with great focus. "I'll go change," he said from somewhere behind her. The sound of his footsteps. A door. Silence. She put her bag down. She poured herself a glass of water. She drank it with the urgency of someone cooling a specific kind of internal situation down. Get it together, she told herself. He is the father of your children. He is a responsible adult who is helping with childcare. There is nothing notable occurring. He came back in a grey-fitted t-shirt and pants. The t-shirt was not helpful. It was a completely normal garment that fit him in a completely normal way, and Prudent was finding it deeply problematic, and she was going to keep that entirely to herself. There's food, he said, moving to the microwave without fanfare. I made extra. He put a plate in, set the timer, and turned back to lean against the counter with the ease of someone entirely at home. Good call. Good call. She sat at the kitchen island. She was fine. She was a grown woman who had run a division, raised twins, and survived Seoul. She was fine. How were they? The board game disagreement was genuinely complex. I asked Sean to walk me through the rules. He spent 11 minutes on the rules. That sounds right. The rules were more sophisticated than some contracts I've signed. He designed them himself. Do-yoon looked at her with something soft in his expression. Of course he did. The microwave beeped. He set the plate in front of her. Sat down across the island. He'd made jollof rice with what appeared to be a very competent attempt at fried plantain, which was either the most endearing thing she'd ever seen or evidence of something she was not ready to categorize. You made jollof, she said. I followed a video, he said. Simi supervised. How was Simi's supervision? Rigorous. I was rated a 6 out of 10. She said the seasoning needed work but showed promise. Prudent looked down at her plate. Her heart was beating fast for this man. She ate. It was a 7, at minimum. She said nothing. They cleared the table together. She was reaching across to collect his glass when his hand landed on hers. Not intentionally. Or maybe intentionally. She would think about the distinction later. Everything in the room went completely still. She looked at his hand on hers. She looked up at him. He was already looking at her, had been, she understood, for several seconds, and the expression on his face was not the careful managed neutrality he'd been wearing for 6 weeks. It was something else. Something that had been present longer than 6 weeks, longer than 6 years, something that had simply been waiting for the exact dimensions of this kitchen at 9:58 on a Saturday night. He didn't move his hand. She didn't move hers. Do-yoon, she said. A warning, or an answer, or both, she genuinely did not know. I know, he said. We agreed. I know, he said again, and he leaned in, and she let him, let herself, which was the real fact of it, and then he kissed her. Deep and slow. He lifted her slightly, and she had both hands in his shirt and was not thinking about anything contractual or strategic or sensible at all. When they pulled apart, both of them were breathing differently. He looked at her. She looked at him. A pause that contained approximately the entire last 8 years. I'm sorry, he said. Are you? She said. She did not particularly sound like she was asking. No, he admitted. But I'm saying it anyway. She almost laughed. She stepped back. Put the counter between them again, because the counter was a sensible piece of furniture and she appreciated it. She pressed 2 fingers to her lips for a moment, not consciously, just, and then drop her hand. Go get the kids, she said. He looked at her. They're at Simi's playdate 2 floors up, she said. They texted me when I was in the cab. Go get them. He went. They carried them home together, Sean half asleep and genuinely boneless in the specific way of a child who has fought sleep until the last possible second. Simi awake enough to make 2 observations about the night sky before going under completely. Do-yoon carried Sean. Prudent carried Simi. He met her at the door to leave. Prudent, he said. I know, she said. Preemptive. She folded her arms, not defensively, just holding something in. I'm sorry, he said again. If that was... It wasn't, she said. Quietly. Honestly. Which was perhaps more information than she'd meant to give him. He went still. Go home, she said. We'll, she searched. We'll figure out what that means. He looked at her for a long moment in the low light of the hallway. And then, because he had promised to wait and had meant it every single time he'd said it, he nodded once, and he left. She closed the door. She stood with her back against it for a full minute, in the quiet flat, with her sleeping children down the hall and the city going about its business outside the windows, and she thought about kissing someone in his own kitchen while they were standing next to dirty plates and leftover jollof rice. The absolute lack of glamour in it, the complete and total failure of the moment to be anything other than embarrassingly, undeniably real. She pressed her fingers to her lips again. Stop it, she told herself. She did not stop it. She told no one. She told no one for exactly 1 week, at which point Simi, who was 7 years old and had her mother's eyes and an unsettling ability to read a room, looked up from her breakfast on a Thursday morning and said, "Something happened." Prudent did not look up from her tablet. Nothing happened. Something happened, Sean confirmed from behind his cereal box, without looking up either. You two need hobbies, Prudent said. We have hobbies, Simi said. But also we are observant. Extremely observant, Sean agreed. Nothing happened, Prudent said, with the weight of a woman who was not going to be cross-examined by 7-year-olds at 7 in the morning. A pause. Is he coming Friday? Sean asked. She stopped. I don't know. The twins exchanged one of their looks. Mom, Simi said, in the voice she used when she was about to say something she had thought about carefully and intended to say only once. We like him. Prudence set her tablet down. We know it's complicated, Sean said. We are not asking you to explain the complicated part. We are just, he glanced at Simi, registering our position. Our position, Simi confirmed, is that we like him. And that's allowed to be information. They went back to their breakfasts. Prudence sat with the particular experience of being simultaneously outmaneuvered and loved very much by two people who were still in the primary school phase of their development, and she thought about how, of all the things she had managed to raise, she had somehow raised this. She picked up her phone. She put it down. She picked it up again. She typed, Friday is fine. She stared at it. She sent it. 3 seconds later, I'll be there by 10. Do you need anything? She stared at this. At the simple domesticity of it. At the fact that he asked. Simi says the jollof needs more seasoning. A pause. Then, tell Simi I accept the feedback and I've been practicing. Then, how did you know about the jollof? I have my sources. Then, you ate it. She did not respond to this. She set the phone face down, and she drank her coffee. Something had taken root. She had the sense it had been growing for a while. She had the further sense that it was, at this point, past the stage of uprooting. She drank her coffee. She thought, fine. We'll figure out what it means. And somewhere in the back of her, very quietly, something that had been braced for a very long time began, slowly, tentatively, with all appropriate caution and exactly zero guarantee, to unknot. Part 2. Prudent walked into the room where Duyun's mother and Yuna were waiting. She did not flinch. Not once. And before the night was over, they were both on their knees. End of part 1. Please subscribe, like and comment so you won't miss part 2. Thank you.